Hello to everyone and the internet. It is currently Monday, December 31st, the final day of 2018. New Year's is tomorrow. I am Nathan of Washington, and you are watching Culture Shock, the only show on the internet that has to separate an issue of culture from an issue of politics. And this is the news. Alright everybody, so this is the final Culture Shock of 2018. Let's see what's gotta be said. French protests not over, now targeting the mainstream media. It just never stops. Well, with the yellow vest, does it? They just never stop rioting. That just shows how shitty France has become. And you know what? They shouldn't have to stop. They should keep going until France dies, so that it can be reborn as something greater, a new France. Let old France die and let new France rise up from the ashes. Because at this point there really is, after a thorough examination I've recently made of the recent French history, there is no hope for old France. Time for a new France. A new, better France. Bottom line, though, is the French mainstream media has been constantly spewing propaganda since the riots began, and the Yellow Vests now added it to their agenda. It is a common practice in politics these days to make use of the mainstream media as a propaganda and information machine to prop up your political agenda. I don't know if America started that trend, but that is definitely where it is the most noticeable. And the Democrats are the ones who largely make use of it. The Republicans naturally retaliated with a propaganda machine of their own, Fox News, but they only got one outlet. Democrats have like 4 outlets. But I'm going to get a little psychological here because I do know quite a bit about psychology. I mostly learned it for the sake of self-therapy, which I did need to some extent. But the psychology of the Yellow Vests, what truly motivates them towards these goals and acts, whether they're right, left, center, whatever they are, what's really going on in the brains of the Yellow Vests, in those monkey brains, in those monkey human brains, they feel violated by their own government. They feel betrayed, outraged. And why? 1, their national sovereignty and their livelihood has been violated by the EU and the UN Migration Pact. Emmanuel Macron attempted to increase a fuel tax, which made life on them harder, to the point where it was unnecessary. Generally speaking, not only was life harder for them, but also their very means by which they found sustainability in their lives was shaky, very much like a rickety bridge, which you could potentially fall through and die. They lacked a proper health care or financial safety net. And of course, finally, their politicians did not understand the struggles of the poor, because they were all rich, snobby elitists. Everything about France, old France, has been a betrayal of the people's trust, of the people's livelihood, and of their rights. This creates a lot of unpleasant feelings in the minds of these people, and they're acting out on those feelings. To them, the government has become the enemy. Even more preeminent than Muslim terrorists who've made use of the open border policy. They're more worried about their own government than terrorists. Think about that. Their own government. They feel like they've got no one else to turn to. And they've got all this anger and rage and a sense of that they've been abused, and now they're taking that out on the person they see as the perpetrator. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the Yellow Vests are primarily male, because that is a very male line of thinking. It is the psychology of men that they feel victimized, they see a perpetrator, and then they act out against that perpetrator unless they are otherwise suppressed if the perpetrator is seen as too frightening or too powerful, and in some way negating. But the French government is not too powerful, is not negating. They are fighting back against who they perceive as someone who has victimized them. And in many ways they have. The French government is, well, it's illegitimate. It is time to kill old France and make a new France. The Yellow Vests have been victimized. Their psychology, the way they're thinking right now, is justified. It's time for them to fight back against an illegitimate and cruel, despotic government, as all these globalist governments are becoming more and more all the time. Angelina Jolie to help BBC create new type of news program aimed at the young. Yeah, the funny thing is that the BBC is the world's biggest fake news outlet and purveyor of propaganda and fake history. Essentially writing white people out of their own history and making it look like we were always multicultural. No, you weren't. There were never black people fighting for Scotch independence, even though they did a documentary that made it look like there were. Nonsense. But bottom line is her intentions are to basically do what I'm doing. Her format's going to be based on, instead of traditional journalism, they're instead going to use accredited, reliable sources and fact checkers. Right? They're doing a news show based on the basic format of independent online news, like my show. And I think that there's a good chance that her intentions are genuine, but it doesn't matter. Because someone at the BBC will inevitably corrupt her work. And they're going to turn it into just more fake news. Possibly even right under her nose without her realizing it. She's going to get some editor that the BBC hired, or they're going to have some fact checker that the BBC hired, deliberately to corrupt her show into yet another fake news outlet. Just you wait and see. I guarantee that's what's going to happen. And in a country with a government that grows more and more despotic by the day, it seems almost an impossible task. You might as well just overthrow every last globalist government and start over, like they're doing in France. But she basically seems to be aiming to do what I do, on a much higher budget. I mean, let's hope it goes well for her. I mean, after all, I am a capitalist, and competition is great. Let the games begin, all right? Because competition is great for capitalism. Let us compete, Miss Jolie. Let's see who can tell. Let's see who can fit more stories. Let's see who can tell more truths. Let's see who's the better, honest newscaster. Let's do this. And let's hope the BBC doesn't screw you over, which they may very well do. I'll have to fact check your show, and you can go ahead and fact check mine. Let's do this. Taiwan and Lebanon go yellow. Anti-globalist yellow vest movement spreading to Asia. There's been a lot of bullshit in Taiwan and Lebanon too. They've been pushing the open borders narrative, among other liberal ideas. And guess what? Since Asians have been, not just the Japanese, but Asians in general, have been historically very xenophobic, it didn't take long for a yellow vest movement to start there. It did not take long at all. Their going globalist was relatively recent, and they almost immediately joined in. Sometimes a little xenophobia can actually be a good thing, so long as it doesn't reach the level of just straight paranoia. Our differences are not a detriment or a danger. They are a source of richness. As when an artist is about to make a mosaic, it is better to have titles of many colors available rather than just a few. The experiences of family teaches us this. As brothers and sisters, we are all different from each other. We do not always agree, but there's an unbreakable bond uniting us, and the love of our parents helps us to love one another. An insatiable greed marks all human history, even today, when paradoxically, a few dine luxuriously while all too many go without the daily bread needed to survive. Standing before the manger, we understand that the food of life is not material riches, but love, not gluttony, but charity, not ostentation, but simplicity. That's the Pope. But, you know what? The Pope also said in that same speech that Christians must reject sovereignty and embrace globalism. A system that by its very nature creates conflict. Because people of other cultures have different values that contradict each other and creates conflict. And we get things like crime, violation of rights, and general human misery because of globalism. And you know what? Let's face it. Francis is a globalist turd. A lot of that stuff did sound awfully nice, didn't it? But that's how politicians make this stuff sound so appealing. They take it and they wrap it up in a nice little bow that makes it look all nice and appealing, but is in fact absolutely horrible. That's essentially taking a turd, shining it, polishing it, spraying it to make it smell nice, but at the end of the day it's still a turd. That's the same basic principle. Bottom line is, do not reject sovereignty. Do not embrace globalism. Do the opposite. You'll thank me later. I'm now going to read you an article on the coming Swedish Civil War that it's on its way. Sweden on the brink of civil war. Almost hard to believe. It's been a pretty peaceful country in the past, but not right now. Sweden is on the brink of a massive civil war as a result of Europe's open border policy, according to international security expert Ole Fjordgren. In an interview with Ingrid and Maria, Fjordgren warns, "We have basically given up, and the criminals have seized power. Right now we have nothing to oppose, and I can't see that we could reverse the development." Infowars.com, oh boy, reports describing Sweden as a freight train heading for a rock wall. Fjordgren says that the political unwillingness to admit how bad things have become, in addition to people who point out the problems being labeled racist, means that Sweden is close to becoming a failed state. Citing Lebanon as an example of what happens to society when integration fails and different ethnic and criminal gangs engage in turf wars, Fjordgren sees only one possible development in Sweden's future: a civil war. This is in part because while police are still operating by old outdated rules, criminals have become more ruthless and play by completely different rules. Fjordgren says that the last resort would be for Sweden to adopt a New York City-style zero-tolerance policy on crime. Although given the country's progressive approach to justice, this seems highly unlikely. The judiciary must ensure that these dangerous people are incapacitated and removed from the streets, he argues. Sweden's growing crime problem has been exacerbated by the country opening its borders to millions of migrants in recent years. As a Spectator study noted, murder is up 40% since 2012. The number of gun homicides has more than doubled in 10 years compared with Britain. It is 5 times more common for young men in Sweden to be shot and killed. Grenade attacks, mass torching of vehicles, and other crimes are also on the rise. Figures released in August found that 58% of convicted rapists and 85% of all convicted assault rapists in Sweden were born outside of Europe. In cases where the victim did not know the attacker, the proportion of foreign offenders is more than 80%. Nearly 40% of the convicted rapists are from the Middle East or from Africa. Civil war or total collapse? Complete chaos. Some would say that those are very much the same thing, but not always. The American Civil War is not a total collapse. It was more of like a sustained, slow collapse. Bottom line is, though, Sweden is going to a very dark place, and the rest of Europe may potentially follow. So, if you're watching this and you're Swedish, stay safe. And if you feel a need to fight for your country, then do so. Patriotism is a wonderful thing. I will now read you yet another article about U.S. kids that get raped by immigrants. Specifically, the number is 10,800 U.S. children were raped by illegal immigrants in 2018. What a wonderful final news story of the year. But it must be heard. The number of U.S. children raped by illegal immigrants in 2018 was a staggering 10,800, according to data compiled by NC FIRE, North Carolinians for Immigration Reform and Enforcement. Oh, so that's what they're called, North Carolinians. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? By blocking the funding for a U.S.-Mexico border wall, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are condemning thousands more children to suffer a similar fate. AmericanLibertyReport.com reports, what is it going to take to get a wall built on our southern border? Tucker Carlson had the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, on his show this past week to talk about the blazing success of Israel's border wall with Egypt. They got a border wall. 55,000 illegal aliens from poor African countries had snuck into Israel in 1 year. That's a huge number for such a tiny geographic area, as the rates of rape, murder, burglary, grand theft auto, and dynamited ATM machines skyrocketed. Dynamited ATM machines? How are you supposed to get the money out of that after you do that? That's weird. That's a crazy thing to do. How are you supposed to get the money? Don't you blow up the money too? I don't know, maybe it's not the point. Israel's government opted to build a wall on its border. Pelosi and Schumer insisted in their public debate with Trump that a wall won't work. How about Israel's wall? In 2016, the number of illegals dropped to less than 20. In 2017, it dropped to 0. Zilch. Nada. Israel has proven that a border wall is 100% effective in keeping out illegal immigration. Perhaps America could try to recreate that experiment, given that the total costs for the wall are less than 1/5 of what illegal aliens cost. Taxpayers in a single year. 2.5 months after the wall is completed, it will have paid for itself. Talk about long-term value. Well, that's a claim that Trump made. We'll see it when it happens. We'll see when it happens, if that's true or not. One of the most disgusting elements of our lack of a wall on our southern border is the fact that most of the Americans who originally demanded a border wall have been dead for many years. Mexico's Revolutionary War lasted from 1910 to 1920. It was during those years of bloody, violent conflict amid our dysfunctional southern neighbors that Americans began asking Congress to build a wall to keep Mexico's problems on Mexico's side of the border. The federal government sent troops to the border to keep the violence from spilling into America. Citizens were rightly concerned that Mexican partisans, starving due to a war with their own federal government, would begin raiding and pillaging American border towns for food. The Texas Rangers were reactivated to patrol the border, and other states enlisted militia groups to protect the American people from being victimized by a war that had nothing to do with our own citizens. After the states complained for years that they were dealing with a federal problem, the American people began asking for a big, beautiful, huge wall on our southern border. Wouldn't it make it more sense, they argued, to put up a large physical barrier instead of having to patrol huge stretches of land with armed guards on horseback? It would have been a huge cost savings to build a wall. Congress responded to years of American requests for a wall by forming the Federal Border Patrol in 1924. In other words, America's government has been trying to deal with the border crisis in exactly the same manner for the past 100 years without trying anything new. How about if we just try the wall? Could we at least build it and test the results for a few years? Just so we can finally alleviate Nancy Pelosi's concerns that a wall won't work? Why would it even look the other way as Nancy invests hundreds of thousands of dollars in a ladder manufacturing company? Meanwhile, data compiled by NC FIRE reveals that the state of North Carolina has arrested an average of 18 illegal aliens every month this year for the crime of child rape. Statistically, this means that the 50 states in America are on track to arrest 10,800 illegal aliens for raping children. And in 2018, and that 10,800 figure is a bare minimum. Super generous, giving the illegal alien child rapists the benefit of the doubt. Number. A total of 10,800 arrests assumes that each illegal alien child rapist only rapes one child in America. Many will rape 3 or 4, or a dozen before they are caught. So the true number could be in the 30,000 to 40,000 raped children range. Given that these 10,800 child rapes would have been 100% preventable if the illegal alien child rapists had not been in America, we would love to see these figures shared prominently on a national news broadcast. Unfortunately, that might make some illegal alien cancer researchers look bad. So we'll probably never hear it repeated. We hate to break it to you, America, but when Mexico sends us child rapists, sometimes they're not sending us their best child rapists. Just out of curiosity, we would love to hear what Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi's cutoff number would be. If 10,800 raped children in America is not enough to make the desired wall on our southern border, where is the line? Would 20,000 child rapes be too many? How about 50,000? Or should we just accept that mass amounts of child rape are what we have to endure as a country so we can atone for some sin that we never committed against Mexico? Here's another fun fact. You can share at Christmas parties. Mexico has an estimated 140,000 civilians killed in the cartel wars that have been raging unabated down there since 2001. Which means that every 2 years, more Americans die from fentanyl that comes in through Mexico than Mexico's lost in a bloody 17-year war. We're starting to think that maybe Mexico has a lot of problems that its child rapists are bringing with them when they sneak over the border. Yeah, drug smuggling as well. We've been asking for a wall for 100 years now, but instead we still have the Border Patrol trying to do the job. The results is 10,800 annual child rapes and 70,000 plus fentanyl deaths. We're really sorry that it makes Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer uncomfortable to have to talk about the wall out in the open, in the light of day, but we're sorrier for all of the raped children and fentanyl overdose victims and their families. So suck it up, Buttercup. We want the wall, we want it now. That article is a hell of a presentation. Yeah, it's a bit emotional, but you know what? It's true. I'll have to look into the thing about Americans asking for the wall for over 100 years, because that's news to me. I had not heard that yet. So I'm going to have to look into that. I certainly will. I will take the time. Because that seems like a pretty interesting little tiddly bit. But I guess the point is that if their statistics are accurate, which that article is pretty well cited, so I'm pretty sure that that it's probably true. And even if it's not, no one denies the drug smuggling. Well, except the Democrats, of course. No one denies the drug smuggling. The drug smuggling alone merits the wall. And the thing about Israel, I mean, that is true. I'd known about their border wall with Egypt for quite some time. Actually, when I originally heard about that one, I thought it was kind of cheesy. The idea of a border wall does seem a little corny to me for some reason. It just seems to have this sort of cliche feel about it. Who knows, maybe that's why some people are opposed to it. Just because it sounds kind of corny and stupid. That's what everyone thinks about Trump. They think he's corny and stupid. Who cares? At the end of the day, who cares what mean word he said? Who cares? He executes the office of president. That's all that matters. The content of his character matters too, sure. But at the end of the day, it's only one issue in a bucket of issues. Overall, he executes the office of president better than any other president we've had in the past 10 years, in the past 15 years. He's the best president we've had in a while since Bill Clinton, who balanced the budget twice. He took care of the American budget. Bottom line is, Trump is a great thing that has happened to us. And even if you disagree, at least you need to learn to respect the office of president. Build that border wall. That's what I'm saying. Build that border wall to keep the drug runners out. And the child rapists, if they exist. And for our final story today, and this is the final story for 2018 from this show, Wiccans offended by Trump saying witch hunt. Well, look, I'm actually a secular theosophist. I study all kinds of religions, trying to understand their beliefs from their perspective, trying to actually get what they truly believe. And I gotta tell you, Wicca as a religion can be very snowflake at times. It can be very PC. It's either them or Gnostics can also be very PC. I mean, the Gnostics are too afraid to call the occult the occult. They call it spirit science, because that's more of a friendly, innocent label to something that is generally seen as evil by most people. And I don't know if it's evil, but it is kind of scary. Bottom line is, they get all offended about the, people were murdered, witches were murdered, people accused of witchcraft, blah, blah, blah. That's their moral platform that Wiccans go on about, is the murder of supposed witches in Salem. And I agree the witch trials were pretty messed up, but going on and on about it and bellyaching, what does that do? At that point, you're just complaining for the sake of complaining, aren't you? I mean, that's stupid. Why don't you get your big boy pants or big girl skirt and get the fuck over it? It happened. When they created the concept of destiny, they got it wrong. Destiny's not in the future, it's in the past. It's the past you can't change. So get the hell over it already. People who are constantly living in the past, dead in the present. That's a quote of Louis Farrakhan, if you're curious. Bottom line is, a little bit of everyone's offended by Trump with something he said. So at this point, get over it. There's nothing you can do to change what he's going to say, so get over it. Anyway, that's it for the culture shock today, folks. Have yourself a great fucking new year.